Next time you are standing on a train platform, waiting for your commute, do something most people never do. Step back from the yellow safety line, look down past the edge of the platform, and really look at what is beneath those tracks. Not the rails, not the wooden beams holding them together. Look further down. There they are, stones. Millions of rough, gray, jagged stones stretching out in both directions as far as you can see. They are everywhere. Every track, every country, every climate. You will find the exact same layer of ugly, broken rocks beneath the railway lines of Japan, India, Germany, Brazil, and the United States. It does not matter if the train above them is a century-old steam locomotive or a brand new high-speed bullet train traveling at 300 kilometers per hour. The stones are always there. And if you have ever stopped to think about it, really think about it, the whole arrangement looks almost absurd. We are talking about some of the most advanced engineering achievements in human history. Machines weighing hundreds of tons, carrying thousands of passengers, traveling at extraordinary speeds. And we rest them on a loose pile of rocks, not bolted to concrete, not fixed to solid ground, just sitting on a bed of broken stones. Why? Why would any serious engineer, with access to modern materials and technology, choose gravel as the foundation for a railway? Why not just pour a solid concrete base and bolt the tracks directly to it? The answer to that question is not simple, and it is not obvious. It involves the physics of pressure, the chemistry of water, the biology of plant roots, and one of the most surprising historical connections in the entire story of modern transportation. A link between the birth of the railways and the ancient practice of ocean sailing that almost nobody knows about. Welcome to Normal Things, Crazy Origins. Today we are uncovering why every railway track on Earth is built on a bed of broken stones, and why replacing them with anything more modern would be a catastrophic mistake. To understand why the stones are there, you first have to understand the problem they are solving. And the problem begins with weight. A fully loaded freight train is one of the heaviest moving objects that human beings have ever built and operated on land. A single locomotive can weigh well over 200 tons. Add a full consist of loaded freight wagons behind it, and you are looking at a total train weight that can exceed 10,000 tons, the equivalent of stacking several thousand family cars on top of each other and driving them down a single narrow strip of track. That almost incomprehensible weight does not spread itself out politely across a wide area. It concentrates, it focuses. Through the wheels, through the axles, through the rails, down through the wooden sleepers, it drives itself into the ground at specific, intense pressure points. If you place that kind of concentrated force directly onto ordinary soil, even compacted soil, the ground would not hold. It would compress, shift, and deform. The track would sink unevenly. Rails would tilt, buckle, and diverge. A train traveling over deformed track does not slow down gracefully. It derails. And a derailment at speed is a catastrophe. This is the fundamental engineering problem that the bed of stones, technically called track ballast, exists to solve. But to understand how a pile of loose rock solves it, you have to think about pressure differently. Imagine you are trying to walk across a patch of deep, soft mud in high heels. With every step, the entire weight of your body focuses through that tiny heel tip into a minuscule contact point, and you sink immediately. Now imagine you put on a pair of wide, flat snowshoes. Suddenly, your weight is spread across a much larger surface area. The pressure at any single point drops dramatically, and you stay on top of the mud. The ballast layer works on exactly this principle. The sleepers, those heavy horizontal beams crossing the track, sit on top of the ballast. When the train passes over, the sleepers push down into the stones, and the stones redistribute that force outward and downward across an enormous surface area. The intense concentrated pressure from the wheels becomes a much gentler, dispersed load across many square meters of ground. The earth beneath does not get crushed. The track does not sink. The train stays on the rails. But here is where it gets more interesting. Because the ballast does not just distribute weight, it does something that no solid concrete foundation could ever do. It moves. Very slightly, almost imperceptibly, but it moves. And that movement is not a flaw, it is a carefully engineered feature. When a train passes at speed, it generates not just downward force but lateral vibration, a complex, rhythmic shaking that travels through the track structure with every wheel rotation. If the track were rigidly fixed to a concrete slab, that vibration would have nowhere to go. It would reflect back into the rails, into the wheels, into the train itself, creating cumulative stress that would fatigue the metal over time and eventually cause fractures. The ballast layer absorbs this vibration. The stones shift microscopically against each other, converting the kinetic energy of the vibration into tiny amounts of heat and sound, dissipating it harmlessly before it can damage anything structural. The track floats, ever so slightly, on its bed of stones. And that floating is what keeps it intact. Now, you might reasonably ask, why these specific stones? If you have ever looked closely at railway ballast, you will have noticed that it is not smooth. It is not the kind of rounded gravel you might find on a beach or a garden path. It is angular, sharp, almost aggressive-looking rough broken fragments with jagged edges and irregular shapes. This is not an accident, and it is not a cost-saving measure. It is a precise engineering specification. Imagine filling a container with perfectly round marbles. When you apply pressure, the marbles roll against each other freely, and the whole mass shifts and slides with almost no resistance. Now imagine filling the same container with sharp, irregular broken fragments that have jagged edges and corners. When you apply pressure, those edges and corners lock against each other. They interlock, grip, and create a mass that resists movement with enormous strength while still retaining just enough flexibility to absorb vibration. Railway ballast is almost always made from crushed granite or quartzite, exceptionally hard rocks that are mechanically broken rather than naturally weathered, specifically to produce those sharp, angular shapes. The hardness matters too. Soft stones would grind down under the repeated impact of passing trains, producing fine dust that would fill the gaps between stones, destroy the drainage properties of the ballast, and ultimately cause the whole layer to behave like compacted mud rather than an engineering foundation. And drainage is the second great function of the ballast layer 1 that is arguably just as important as load distribution. Water is one of the most destructive forces in civil engineering. When it rains heavily on a railway, large volumes of water must go somewhere, and they must go there quickly. Consider what would happen if the track were laid on a solid concrete base. The water would pool on the surface, sitting against the steel rails and accelerating corrosion. It would find cracks in the concrete and work its way in, freezing and expanding in cold weather, progressively destroying the structure from inside. It would saturate the soil below the concrete slab, undermining its stability. But a thick bed of angular stones is essentially a perfectly engineered drainage system. Water falls onto the ballast and immediately begins flowing downward through the countless gaps between the irregular stones, channeled away from the track structure and into the surrounding drainage ditches with extraordinary efficiency. The ground beneath the ballast stays dry and stable, regardless of what the weather is doing above. A railway track built on proper ballast can handle a torrential rainstorm that would wash away a poorly drained road without any effect whatsoever on track geometry or stability. The third enemy that ballast defeats is one you would probably never think of: vegetation. Plants are relentless. Given any foothold in soil, they will grow, and their roots will push into every available crack and gap with surprising force. A railway track surrounded by bare soil would quickly be invaded by grasses, shrubs, and eventually trees. Root systems growing beneath and between the sleepers would lift the track, disrupt the ballast geometry, and destroy the precise alignment that safe train operation demands. But a deep layer of sharp, compacted stone is one of the most hostile environments imaginable for plant growth. There is no soil in which seeds can take root. There is no moisture retained at the surface. There is no stability for a root system to exploit. The ballast layer essentially sterilizes the track structure against biological invasion, maintaining the geometric precision of the track without any chemical treatment or ongoing intervention. Now, here is the part of the story that almost nobody knows, and it connects the modern railway to something entirely unexpected. Why do we call this material ballast at all? The word does not come from engineering. It does not come from geology. It comes from the sea. For centuries, wooden sailing ships faced a specific and dangerous problem when they sailed empty. Without the weight of cargo in their holds, they rode too high in the water. A ship sitting too high is dangerously unstable. It catches the wind from above rather than driving through the water, and it becomes vulnerable to capsizing in rough seas. To solve this, sailors would fill the empty hold with heavy material stones, sand, gravel, purely to weigh the ship down and lower its center of gravity. This weight was called ballast, from an Old Norse or Low German root meaning simply dead load or bare load. When the ship arrived at its destination port and took on its proper cargo of goods, the ballast stones were no longer needed. They were shoveled out of the hold and dumped on the dockside. Over decades and centuries, ports accumulated enormous piles of these discarded ship stones. When the first railway engineers began building tracks in Britain in the early 19th century, they needed a cheap, heavy, angular material in large quantities to build their track foundations. They looked at the mountains of discarded stone piled up at every major port and recognized them immediately as the perfect material. The ship stones went straight from the dock onto the railway. The engineers adopted the nautical term along with the material. And so the word ballast, born on the open ocean, became permanently attached to the stones beneath every railway track on Earth. So the next time you are standing on that platform waiting for your train, and you glance down at those millions of rough gray stones stretching away into the distance, you will know the full story. They are not there because nobody thought of a better solution. They are not a primitive remnant of early railway engineering waiting to be replaced by something more sophisticated. They are a load distributor, a vibration absorber, a drainage system, a weed suppressant, and a piece of living maritime history, all at the same time. Engineers have tested concrete alternatives, rubber alternatives, and embedded track systems. For certain specialized applications, tunnels, bridges, urban tram lines, these alternatives have their place. But for the vast majority of the world's railways, carrying the vast majority of the world's trains, the broken stones dumped by sailors at the dockside remain, after 200 years, the best engineering solution anyone has ever found. If you enjoyed this journey beneath the tracks, hit that like button, share this video with someone who has stood on a platform and never thought to ask why the stones are there, and subscribe to Normal Things, Crazy Origins for more stories about the everyday world hiding extraordinary histories, because the most surprising origins are always hiding in plain sight, right beneath your feet. Thanks for watching.